Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. I don't know whether you're a believer in things that float about in the atmosphere, that you ingest them and they can make you ill, or whether you're somebody who thinks actually none of that's really relevant. It's actually your body has ingested all these things, but it's not that they make you ill, it's just that your body is detoxing out of the general swamp of goodness knows what that's in the atmosphere. Well, germ theory and terrain theory have often battled out for, I suppose, what is the truth. And who knows? But I know I certainly don't. But I have a guest who has his own views, and we're all entitled to our own views, he says very quickly. He is a community activist and a self-publisher and speaker. His name is Daniel Thompson-Mills. And Daniel's been on the show once before talking about a previous book that he's written. He's written 3. We'll have a look at those in a minute. But Daniel, welcome back to the channel.
Lovely. Thank you for having me again, Richard.
It is lovely to have you on the show. We've met now in real life, which is even better.
It sure is.
At the Shine seminars, which go on each year and bring a whole load of interesting people telling their truths to a lot of inquiring minds. And you can't ask better than that, in my opinion.
Amazing event, wasn't it? Yes.
Fantastic. So now we're going to be looking at terrain theory and germ theory and reasons and why. But I mentioned that you'd written 3 books and you'd been on here previously. Let me just pull up very quickly here, if I may, your website, which is Dandelion Speaks, and I'll put the link in the description so people can go and check you out, as it were. And here we go. We were looking at the truth of how money is created and the financial system, which you wrote and we featured on the channel. The book we're going to be looking at and your ideas here, the myth that viruses cause disease and the nature of illness. We will have a look at that in a moment, as I say. And the other book, which we'll have to get you back because, of course, people are very concerned about this and governments are making policy on the back of this, The Case Against Man-Made Climate Change, How the Environment Movement is Being Manipulated for Nefarious Ends. Fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for coming on. And I've got all 3 of your books. You were very generous to give me one. One is actually downstairs, the other one, and here they are. And I can tell you, I've read the one we're going to talk about today in preparation for the show. And you write very, I was going to say you write very easily. It reads very easily. For if you're not familiar with things, you put them over incredibly plainly, I suppose, so that a novice like me can get to understand what you're saying, but without losing anything. So I just sort of like to say that I'm not trying to increase your sales necessarily. But
I appreciate that, and people do say that often. I do feel the books are very accessible, and they sort of lead you in. Each one has a sort of 3 or 4 page summary at the beginning. Just get the overview and see all the main links that are in there, and then it dives deeper into all the main points, and then there's appendices which take you even deeper if you want to go down into more in-depth information and perspectives on particular topics. So it's there for everybody, from both the beginner to the advanced student.
So now, like in all these things, particularly in health and here on this platform that we're on, it's best to just so we keep in favour, or at least the intention is to stay in favour with the terms and conditions of any of these privately owned platforms that share videos, that we just make a couple of simple statements, I suppose. That, I mean, I'm no expert in any of this, and this is I'm just purely bringing to the audience ideas, which is what we're trying to do. And from your own point of view, Daniel.
Yes, well, I'm not a healthcare professional. I'm not here to give medical advice in any way. all I'm going to be saying is for information purposes only. This is what I'm saying is based on my own research and my own life experience as well, and is my perspective on things. But it's up to you really to work this all out for yourself and see what feels right for you. I'm
Yes.
certainly not saying, I'm all seeing, all knowing, or anything like that. And really, with all my books, I'm just, as much as anything, trying to create debate where I think
Yes.
debate has been curtailed.
And it's very healthy to have debate because it's something, funny enough, I was talking to somebody else earlier, that debate has been something that has been taken away a lot of in society, particularly, say, at schools, in which children are learning things as if they are 100% correct. And they're not offered the chance to debate as much as perhaps they ought to work out what they think is correct and not correct.
Well,
And
yes, we hear this phrase bandied around quite a lot. The science is settled, and
yes,
it's been particularly used in relation to climate change, but also in relation to the medical sphere, and even there, more specifically to do with the what we might call the roll up your sleevers. But it's to say the science is settled is an anti-science statement, because science is a process. It's not a fixed thing. It's forever evolving, and it should be a process of an open inquiry and debate,
yes,
where
and every theory is there open to. I mean, I believe that scientists actually they want whatever is the conclusion they've come to be challenged in case there is a better conclusion that has yet to be found,
well,
which
that's
is
the theory. But and there should be, for example, um, in all experiments to do with the medical sphere, there should be control experiments conducted, and we'll see as we go through that that just doesn't happen.
right.
So the basic scientific method often isn't being followed, and yet we're told that the science is rigorous and all of this sort of stuff.
So your book here is called "The Myth That Viruses Cause Disease and the Nature of Illness," and this is your treatise,
Yes,
your
it's a
yeah,
treatise.
it's
Yes.
a treaty, yeah, and so let's dive into that then. So what makes you say that it is a myth? Because so much has been built on the idea that viruses are the things that do get you ill, and that we ingest them and away we go. So yeah, tell us why you suggest that.
Absolutely. And but it's one of those things that the more you delve into it, and you don't, it's not difficult to understand at all. The more you delve into it, you see that the whole thing is a house of cards, and it very quickly crumbles in front of you. This very strong case, and etc. So, I mean, just to give you an overview to begin with,
Mm.
um, is the body a battlefield, or is it an ecosystem? Is it a garden? So we have this portrayal that we're constantly under attack from pathogenic microorganisms. They're trying to invade the body and take over the mechanisms of the cell and replicate, um, and they're causing illness, whether it be viruses, bacteria, fungi, whatever. So we need to treat the symptoms, which is called allopathic medicine, treat the symptoms rather than the underlying causes, and blitz all of these microorganisms with antibiotics or whatever. And Bob's your auntie, then you're much better and you can get on with your life. And within that, we've got our body's defense forces that are ranged against these outside pathogens. So there's a war going on. And we hear the war narrative so many times all across the board. The war narrative is a classic, war on terror, war on drugs, war on poverty. And then in this case, it's war on microorganisms. And yes,
So I suppose the question is, do we need a war on these things?
Well,
Or is the body doing something different?
well, exactly. And we're just a reflection of what's around us. So we're a micro of the macro. This is Hermetic wisdom. It's called the principle of correspondence, as above, so below, as without, so within. So what do we see if we're, before all of this concrete and tarmac, if we were, in the Garden of Eden, say, what will we see around us? We would
Yes.
see a pristine ecosystem where everything was working on its different level in its different niche to create wholeness and balance, working synergistically, symbiotically. Well, in fact, okay, unfortunately, that world has been much degraded over the millennia, but we can still understand that principle. Now, the body is just a reflection of that. We're an ecosystem, a garden in microcosm. And what do we want to do to create and maintain health? We need to nurture the terrain of our soil like a gardener tends his or her soil. And the soil is full of microorganisms. It's full of worms, it's full of bacteria, all sorts of different microorganisms that give the soil its health. So, really, regenerative agriculture in relation to growing food and so on is a really good, close ally of um, bioterrain, the bioterrain model of how the body works, because we can understand how the body works by really seeing it through the lens of regenerative agriculture.
Yes, we know. We know that. I mean, there's this huge push now. I would say, just to illustrate your point, that the governments have recognised, and it's been on mainstream media, so it must be true, that highly processed foods are not as beneficial for you than natural foods. And clearly, that has to be the case, because if natural foods were any no good to us, we wouldn't be sitting here today in, well, me in the unnatural environment of lights and electronics and all of that. But I wouldn't be here if, because we only had the natural world to begin with before man came along with all those wonderful pharmaceuticals to sustain us for the last 100 years.
Yes,
Prior to that, we did manage to survive.
yes. Well, we have to go through this step by step, Richard.
Mm.
And certainly, in order to create and maintain health, we need to be thinking about the inputs that we're putting into our system, into our body, into our garden, and also the conditions that we're creating around us. But let's not go there just yet. Let's just really pick apart these microorganisms and what their role is in the body.
Yes.
So the first thing to say is we've got far more microorganisms in the body than actual human body cells. So if yeah, we are literally an ecosystem, and it's not just in the gut, which people know about these days and call the microbiome, but they're throughout the body in every place, and they're really they're working to create balance and wholeness, and that really is the question always, just generally in life, but particularly in relation to health. What is needed for balance and wholeness at this time? So that's the framing of things, rather than the current framing being, as I say, the allopathic model,
Mm.
which is, you've got symptoms and we need to treat the symptoms. And once the symptoms have gone away, then then we've done the job of, you know, um,
Fixing your health,
restoring or
yeah.
creating health. But no, that doesn't deal with the underlying causes. So anyway, let's look at these different microorganisms. Let's think about bacteria and fungi to begin with. Now let's just put them to one side. They exist, but when they're found in the body when somebody's ill, they're there because they are helping clear up the mess. But we'll look at that more in detail in a bit. But let's focus in on viruses at the moment. So it might sound a very brash statement to say, but viruses do not exist. In other words, pathogenic viruses, as we're described, as we're told, they do not exist. Well, that's a very bold statement. Now, how I've now got to back it up, obviously.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
if you want to find a microorganism in any sort of substance, and of course, if we're talking about the recent illness that's been going around, we're talking about a respiratory illness. So we might want to take the lung fluid from an ill person. Now, if we're saying that person's become ill from a virus, it's very obvious, isn't it? We have to find that virus and show it causes disease. Find the virus and show it causes disease.
Is that what they call isolating it?
Well, it is. Now, when you discover that that has ever never been done for any virus, it's jaw dropping.
Right. Because you would imagine that that has been done, because otherwise they couldn't claim that they know exactly what it is that's doing
Yeah.
the damage.
Well, of course, most people just accept what the experts tell
Yes.
them. But as I say, it doesn't take much delving into this to realize that it's all a charade. So yeah, so if you were going to find a virus, what you would need to do is you would need to isolate and purify that virus. So you just had one thing. You only had the virus, and then you would take that and put it into an experimental host, which in the modern context would be typically an experimental animal. That animal would then go on to develop the same symptoms as the ill person that you isolated the virus from their fluid. And then you could isolate that again from the fluid from the experimental host, isolate the virus again, and then you've gone through all the steps of what's called Koch's postulates, which was formulated by Dr. Robert Koch or Koch back in the late 19th century. He was a contemporary of Pasteur, Louis Pasteur, who was really, we can consider him the main founder of the germ theory of disease, which is the paradigm that modern medicine is based on. Now, Robert Koch formulated these postulates, as they're called, but he never actually followed his own postulates, bizarrely enough. But we have them. There are set clear logical steps. And isolation means that with a virus, if it exists, then what you would do is you take that fluid, you would purify it, and then you would put it into an ultracentrifuge, at which point the liquid would separate out to bands of density, and you could pipette out those different bands, look at them under an electron microscope, and if you'd isolated a virus, then you would see just one type of particle in that image. They would all be the same shape, size. Then you could take genetic material from all the different viruses there and sequence that genetic material, and it would all be the same. And that's how you'd find the virus. And as I say, you'd then go on to put that into an animal or a human, and they'd go on to become ill as well. And then you've shown that virus, that particle, causes illness, and the illness specifically that you're looking at. And then that's when you've proved a virus and that it shows disease. So
and very, very logical. I mean, very easy to understand and logical procedure.
yes. Now, there's no dispute that this has never been done. So there's been lots of freedom of information requests made to both health authorities like the UK Department of Health and Social Care, the Centre for Disease Control in America, the Dr. Robert Koch Institute in Germany, and also some of the lead authors of the the isolation and purification, as they call it, of SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus supposedly circulating and causing what's been called what was been called the illness under the pandemic. And anyway, there's been these freedom of information requests. All of them have agreed that no, the Robert Koch's postulates have never been fulfilled for any virus. So how do they supposedly find the virus and show it causes disease? They follow the viral culture method. Are you keeping up with me, Richard?
Yes. Well, I'm interested to know what this viral culture method is.
Yes.
That they follow.
Yes. So, firstly, the virologists, they take fluid from an ill person, say it's respiratory fluid, as we said, lung fluid. Now, rather than isolating and purifying a virus from that fluid, what they do is they add that fluid to a culture, to a petri dish of what's called vero cells. These are monkey kidney cells. So they mix two things together, and then they add something called bovine fetal serum, which is a nutrient taken from the fetus of a cow. Very lovely. And they add that to the culture as well. Now, that is a nutrient, so that feeds the culture. So all of a sudden, you've mixed three substances together. If you then subsequently find a particle, then how do you know where it's come from? Has it come from the ill person, or has it come from the vero cells, or from the cow? You don't, do you? Anyway, so they've got this culture, and it's all hunky-dory. Nothing's going on. So what they do, the virologists, is they start withdrawing the nutrient. They start withdrawing the bovine fetal serum. In other words, they're starving the culture. But again, the culture is able to be fairly robust in that situation. Finally, they add two powerful drugs. One's called gentamicin and one's called anthratericin. And the rationale for this is that gentamicin is an antibiotic, anthratericin is an antifungal, and it's therefore meant to negate, make sure that there's no bacteria or fungi in this culture. But in fact, these drugs are also what's known as nephrotoxins. Do you know what nephrotoxin means, Richard?
No, I don't.
Well, toxin means what?
Well,
Poison.
a poison.
Poison. Nephro means to do with the kidneys. So they're poisonous to kidney cells. So you're adding this to a culture of kidney cells. So you're poisoning the culture. So at this point, you're both starving and poisoning this culture. And lo and behold, unsurprisingly, all the cells in there and the fluid starts breaking up, disintegrating, if you like. This is called the cytopathic effect. That's the technical term for it. So what's happening is these are just the breakdown products of dead or dying cells. Now, then the virologists take this mishmash of stuff and they look at it under an electron microscope, and there's all sorts of different shapes, sizes of particles there. This is not isolation. This is not purification. Isolation means you only have one of something. Anyway, they then point arrows to some of these particles and they say, look, there we go. We found the virus. Well, that's not finding the virus in my view.
And in theory, presumably by mixing things up, I mean, we know that if you mix paint up, it changes the colour of paint. Presumably, if you add things in all the time, you're diluting the original substance and you're potentially creating reactions of some description, so that if you did find something, you don't know whether that's the original thing that you put in there or an end product of the final mixing.
Yes, exactly. And we don't know where it's come from. Certainly, does it from the ill person where the virus is meant to be? Well, we don't know that. Now, how did this all begin? So we want to rewind back to 1954. At that point, there'd been 20 years of the electron microscope. nobody had been able to find the virus of any virus, even though these things supposedly existed,
Yes.
causing illness. But there was a man called John Franklin Enders who said, I know how to find the virus. And he did the viral culture method for the first time for the measles virus. Now, very interestingly, he also did a control experiment. Remember, we talked about the proper scientific method. Normally, you should do a control experiment, at least one,
Mm.
and he did. So this is where he created a culture of monkey kidney cells and so on, but he didn't add anything from an ill person. So and then what did he say when he looked at the results of what came about in the control? He said, what happened? The cytopathic changes, in other words, the breakdown products that were made, were indistinguishable, and he used that word in his paper, indistinguishable from the virus as isolated from the measles infected person. So, in other words, right from the word go with this method, if you don't add anything from an ill person, you get the same effects. That's the end of the story. It's a flawed method to find the virus. But no, this paper went on to win the Nobel Prize. And from then on, every time a virus has been isolated and purified and shown to cause disease, it's always been using the viral culture method, but never, and I repeat, never again has there been any controlled experiments done until recent times,
Right.
when a virologist called Dr. Stefan Lanke, a German virologist, who thought this was all bunkum, managed to crowdfund or get the funding together to go to an independent laboratory and do these control experiments for the first time since 1954. And lo and behold, he was very clearly able to show yet again that you get the same effects going on even when there's no substance from an ill person added. So it's clear and categoric that a virus has never been shown to exist, a pathogenic particle in this regard, what we're told viruses are. So, how do virologists say, well, we can't do Koch's postulates, we have to culture the virus? They say that it's because in the ill person, there's not enough to find. So we have to culture it. We
Oh, I see.
grow it in a culture. Well, but then when you compare that with what the actual narrative is, as what a virus is and what it's doing, it's invading the body, right? It's then taking over the mechanism of the cell, it's replicating, and then it's bursting out in vast numbers out of the cell, which are then going on to infect other cells and do the same. And you're then said to have a high viral load.
Yes, terms that
It's,
a lot of people will
yes.
recognize from recent times.
So it's just bizarre that, I mean, in other words, the body, in that case, if that's true, the body is a culture. You're
Yes.
culturing the virus in the body. So,
So you ought to have
you
a
know,
significant amount of it that a virologist can find.
I mean, these things just don't match up when you start comparing
Yes.
the narrative with what's going on in the real world.
So how do they defend that then if they are genuine virologists? They must know, I mean, the very simple way that you've explained it to me and the audience, they must also know that to be so, and that if they've got somebody who is riddled with this so-called virus, that there must be enough, you know,
Well,
from various places in the body that they
yes.
can extract this so-called virus from.
Well, Dr. Tom Cowan, who's an American terrain medical practitioner, he is really one of my main mentors in all of this. I'm certainly standing on the shoulders of giants, and so I'm very grateful to all the people like him who I've learnt from massively, and their work is very important. Yeah, so he managed to get into a debate with a virologist at some point during the pandemic time, and he said, well, why can't you he asked, "Why can't you follow Koch's postulates?" And the answer from the virologist was, "There's not enough to find." And Dr. Cowan said, "Well, what if you mix the substance of 10 people who are ill, and you concentrate the number of viruses?" "Oh no, that's still not enough." And he went, "What about 100 ill people?" "No, that's still not enough. 1,000 people." And he got up to 10,000 people. And by that time, the virologist refused to answer.
Mm.
So, I think really generally what happens is that people in medical school, they're told that, John Franklin Enders found the measles virus. They don't go and look back at the original paper and find that it's fundamentally flawed. And their whole model is based on this germ theory of disease. And they're as indoctrinated as anybody, really. And, I don't feel that, certainly in most cases, that people are being malicious or deliberately concealing things. I think just generally there seems to be a culture that where you just follow what you're presented with and go forward with it, and
Mm.
and then your whole career and your whole, or your, whether it's academic or as a practitioner, as a GP or whatever, your whole career is based on that. And so then to start unpicking that causes.
So it's a bit like if you're building a house and you put your first rung of bricks slightly on the skew, the rest of the house may be in line with that, but the whole house is on the skew. And it's a question of having your foundation absolutely square. If your foundation
Yes,
is wrong, then everything else above it will
yes,
also be wrong.
yes.
Um,
So,
so
we can then pan out from there. I mean, that's just one aspect of what we call the germ theory of disease. And we can pan out from there and we can see that this theory, and it's very much a theory because it has never been proven in any way. And we can then go on to look at bacteria and fungi, particularly other microorganisms. Now, these do exist, but they've never been shown to actually cause disease, even though we're told in a lot of cases they do. For example, cholera,
right.
or tuberculosis, and so on. So anyway, you guide me where you want to go next. We could talk about those aspects next, if you like.
Absolutely. So just to quickly recap, you've said that nobody has isolated the fact that that's not that a virus exists. I mean, it's not to say that it couldn't happen. We just need to wait for someone to do it, and then we can all 100% agree. Oh, there it is.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But until that time, of course, it can only be a theory, like so many theories, that until it's actually proved, it is a theory that it seems is the foundation of big pharmaceutical, because of, if that's true, then here's all the ways that we can attack that virus.
Yes, well, let's talk about contagion, because I think that's a key aspect of all of this.
Mm,
Why do people generally, ordinary people, why do they think, oh, there's a virus? Well, obviously they've been told there's a virus, but also it's because we experience contagion.
right.
In other words, somebody's ill. Let's say they've got a cold, just a very simple thing. They've got a
Yep.
cold. You go to an event along with a whole other people where this person is sniffling and coughing and blowing their nose and looks rather, pale.
And
Uh,
then we all get it.
and you all get it.
Yeah.
You get it, and other people get it, and you can, and then everybody says, "Oh, there was a virus going around," or
That's right. And you can
bug.
point at the individual. You see, my dad used to do that. My dad used to say, never come round if you've got a cold because I don't want to get it. He was worried that he would get it from me.
Right. So what's going on there? Well, the thing is, we can look and we can find that there's no particle being transferred that creates illness. So during the early 20th century, I mean, these experiments don't happen now, but for example, we had the what was called the Spanish flu in
Yes.
1918, which was right at the end of the First World War. A lot of people getting ill with flu-like symptoms. And there were experiments done there where the snot of an ill person was injected up the nose of a healthy person, and put into their body in different ways. Nobody in these experiments went on to develop the Spanish flu.
And you describe, I remember reading that in your book, you describe how the lengths that people were trying to get this ill person's mucus and nasty phlegm and all of that
Yes.
into many healthy people, and the lengths that and the amount of it, and yet still these healthy people not refused really, but just didn't get ill.
Yes, exactly. So we can see that this theory has not been proven at all. Now, you might.
I suppose the question is that, going back to that, say that we're all sitting at this football match or a party or wherever it is, or my dad saying don't come over, and yet we do see the signs of a contagion.
We all experience contagion. And I think it's really important to say that saying there isn't a virus does not mean that contagion does not exist. All
Right.
it means is that there's no viral contagion because there's no virus.
Right.
So the contagion is not being caused by a particle being transferred from one individual to one or more individuals. So what's going on here?
Mm.
Well, we need to take a step back, and my book starts with the quote from Nikola Tesla, which some of your listeners may know, a very well-known quote of his, which is that if you want to learn the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. So that's the key foundation of what's going on in the universe. It all is about energy, frequency, and vibrational resonance. And matter, particles, chemicals, they're just the end product of energetic processes. So when we understand that, when we can look back at this situation, so what's going on when a person has a cold? They're going through a detoxification process. They're shedding toxins from the body by sweating them out, by coughing them out, by snotting them out, by maybe coming out through the diarrhea, lots of, coming out in all sorts of different ways. The body's trying to get rid of toxins that's accumulated.
Mm.
Now, that person going through that process, which is a healthy process, illness is the body's therapeutic response to being knocked out of balance. We need to consider illness as a good thing, not a bad thing that the body's going through. We need to support and maintain that process, and allow it to fully resolve naturally. That person at this event is going through that process, and they're giving out a vibration, they're giving out a resonance, which the bodies of other people are picking up on. And we may not be consciously aware of that, but we're intimately connected as human beings. In fact, we're intimately connected in the web of life generally, because that's what we're in. We're in the web of life where everything is interconnected and interdependent. So other people are picking up on that sense that that person's going through a detox process. Now, if we can think that the body's detoxing every moment of every day, particularly the liver is working to get toxins out of the blood and so on, and filter them out into the bile, which then goes into the bowel, and then you poop it out. But we live in a very toxic world, Richard, as I'm sure you know.
Yes,
We're,
absolutely.
we're being bombarded with toxins every which way, and it's getting worse and worse. We could list a whole load of things eat very easily. Glyphosate probably being one of the top of the list. Man-made electromagnetic fields, which are very harmful. The list is endless. Anyway, so we're being toxified, and every so often the body decides to go into this. Well, I need to go into a bit of a deeper detox process. So go back to this scenario. other bodies around are picking up on this and saying, hey, that's a really good idea. Yeah, I need to have a bit clear out as well. So I'm going to go into a cold scenario and start getting coughly and sniffly and sweaty and pale and needing to rest and get this stuff out the system. So that's what contagion is. Now,
So I suppose, I mean,
um,
I'm just to jump in very quickly.
yes,
It's just to give an illustration of I think what you mean is, and people might go, "Oh, that sounds ridiculous," but if you yawn in a group of people, inevitably other people will start to yawn as the body sort of responds to other people.
yes,
and
exactly.
and it's completely involuntary. If I'm even now I'm ready to yawn at the
Yeah.
very mere suggestion of it.
Well, laughter, similarly,
Yes.
tears could be the same. So yes,
Many emotions. If you're sad, you go into a room and you feel, you can feel the vibration
yes,
without sort of going, oh, this is a sad room. You just might, it's subconscious, isn't it?
yeah. Or you might be out on the streets in a busy city centre late on a Saturday night, and you might feel threatened.
Yes.
You turn round, and sure enough, there's somebody who's just come out of the pub, rather had too much alcohol to drink, and they're feeling very aggressive, and they're looking at you with malicious intent from behind, and you can pick up on that.
Yes.
I mean, that's a very common experience. You turn around, and sure enough, you realise you've got to get out of there quickly.
So the body is picking up on other people, and when you see that first person detoxing, as you suggest, the body, as you just so well illustrated, is thinking, "Oh yeah, here's a good time," and it's a subconscious thing. I will, and
Yeah,
so
and
later on, a day later, they wake up in the morning and go, "I caught a bloody cold from that chap," misinterpreting what's
yes.
actually going on.
So Dr. Cowan calls this phenomenon, he calls it bioresonance. So
Right.
it's a whole body thing, if you like. And of course, well, somebody might say, well, where's the studies to prove this? Of
Yes.
course, all the research and all the money for that goes into studying viruses and the
Right.
effects of viruses. So unfortunately, we're at a disadvantage, obviously, because there isn't the research on this. This is what we can, best surmise really from all the data coming in, and particularly the experiments that have been done, which totally show the germ theory to be unfounded. So, but it would be great to have research in this area as well, just to find out more about it and see, fully fully prove that this is the case.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we're in this situation where we're in the old paradigm still. We haven't shifted to a new paradigm, which I feel we're on the trajectory to doing. So when that's the case, then research funds will be freed up to look more at this, what's going on here.
So can I ask you a question then? Something that's happened recently to me, and I've isolated what is the cause of this now, and I can almost guarantee it will have my nose streaming, and I will sneeze about 15 times in rapid succession. There is a weed that grows. It grows all over the place in the UK, and one of the reactions, and it's quite rare apparently, is that it causes the pollen, I think, from it causes runny eyes, dribbly nose, and sneezing. Now, my partner Julia is not affected by this at all, and if I sit on a particular wall where this stuff is growing, it at certain times of the year, which suggests that it's the pollen, I will have an allergic reaction to it. Sneeze, runny eyes, dribbly nose. If I take myself away from that, it all stops. So and I can literally walk into the area, find it happens, walk away, body recovers after about an hour, and it goes away.
Okay, so,
And I don't pass that on to Julia. I don't pass that on to anybody else. It's just me and that bloody plant.
Yes. So allergies, yeah, a lot of people experience them. There are obviously a sensitivity that a person has that somebody else doesn't, as you've described. Now, we're starting to get into a much more in-depth discussion here on how this comes about, and I think probably it's best just to stick with the sort of main principles of things, really.
But I suppose my point
What I
being
would
was that
say is
that's
that,
not a it's not a virus from the plant itself,
oh
because
no, no,
I can't pass the fact that I've got ill. It's not being passed to anybody else.
no. But if you think of hay fever, then we're talking about
Yeah.
pollen
Yes.
particles causing a reaction in the body. So
Yes.
that is, yes, that is going on. But the question is, why is that person sensitive to that when others aren't? And that's the question you've posed. And that's where I think we need to take a bit of a step back and look firstly at, well, actually, what causes illness?
Mm.
So if it's not viruses, as I'm saying, and it's not bacteria and fungi, as I'm saying, which is the main things we're being told are causing illness, then what is causing illness? Well, I'm coming back to Dr. Cowan again, particularly mentioning him, and what he has said, based on all the evidence, really, is that there's four causes of illness. So, what are they? So let's just go through them. So, the first one is injury. And this is
Yeah.
very obvious. You fall off your horse, you get knocked over by a car, your body is damaged and it has to go through a repair process. That's very obvious, isn't it?
Yes.
The next one we can call starvation. So, think of the viral culture. Um, Firstly, what did the virologists do? They started starving the culture. So, yes, it's very obvious forms of starvation. We're not getting the right nutrients for the body to just be able to function. But it can not just be about food. It can be we're being starved of clean water. We're being starved of oxygen. Also, we can be starved of affection, starved of communication, starved of social contact, and so on. So starvation is not just the physical aspects, but also the mental, emotional aspects. And then the third reason that people get ill is to do with toxins or poisons. So again, thinking back to the viral culture method, what was the third step that they took? That once they'd withdrawn the nutrient, they'd created the culture, they'd withdrawn the nutrient, and then they'd poisoned it. So what poisons can we think about? Well, all the obvious physical ones like glyphosate, probably the most pervasive poison on the planet. It's water soluble, it's everywhere. It's in the rivers, it's in the rain, it's in the clouds, etc. Well,
And it's sprayed by humans, spray it on the crops.
it's sprayed on crops, and if you're eating non-organic food, you're getting a big dose of it, particularly with wheat products. So that's out there: cyanide, arsenic, all sorts of, Then we can go on to think about man-made electromagnetic fields, 4G, 5G, Wi-Fi, etc., which is very pervasive in our world. But then going on to the more mental, emotional aspects, any trauma that we've received in our lifetime, and we can think of, very significant trauma like sexual abuse, but we all have birth trauma.
Yes.
Everybody has birth trauma, and or particular things that happen in their life which cause trauma. So that's, the mental emotional side of things is massive. So that's the third reason. And any of those mental emotional aspects will cause physical stuff to go on in the body. Now, since the era of recent times, Dr. Cowan has added a fourth reason, which he calls delusional beliefs. So, a fourth reason to become ill is thinking things that are bad for you, that actually are bad for you, are thinking that they're good for your health. So, for example, wearing a mask or socially distancing or socially isolating, they're all good examples of that.
Yes, and we, negative feelings can bring on bad things
Absolutely.
as well.
Negative
Fear.
feelings, yeah. And being in fear is the
Mm,
main. So if you're in fear of a virus spreading and causing illness, then it can actually start to manifest that within the body.
right.
And I think that's a big part of what's been going on in recent times. So the body becomes it's knocked out of balance by one or more of these things going on. So what's our role, both as the patient, if you like, or as healthcare professionals, or just as people who are concerned and want to give the best advice or recommendation? Well, we need to see illness as a good thing. The body's highly intelligent. Okay, it's an incredible technology that we have,
Mm,
and what we want to be doing is allowing and supporting that therapeutic process that the body's gone into to go through its natural course and fully resolve. And how is it how is it supported? Well, it depends really on the underlying causes going on. So if there's a lot of psychological, emotional stuff, then it might be good to get some psychotherapy or some help with that, or counselling, or work in whatever way to resolve that trauma that you have. If it's not if it's being starved of nutrients, then you maybe need to improve your diet, change your diet, and so on. Maybe you need to take some herbs to help the process along, or have some acupuncture, or just getting out into the fresh air and into nature is always very a good thing to do. So, we're coming down here to what are the best inputs and what are the best conditions to create in our life to maximize our health. And then when we do get out of balance, which is inevitable, being a human being, it's part of the process of being human. We allow and support that process to go through. And the first thing to do is rest.
yes.
And let
Well, doctors do tell us to go back to bed and rest, don't they? I mean,
yes,
to be nice to doctors. I mean, they used to do that a hell of a lot, especially in the old days when they didn't have the plethora of white pills that they could offer. One of
yes,
the things was go to bed for several days or go to the seaside, and breathe in some of the salt air and the sunshine.
yes,
Some of these very basic things you don't hear doctors
yeah.
say so much.
And so people go running off to the pharmacy to get, if they've got a cold, to get their Lemsip or whatever, to just blitz the symptoms. And suppressing the symptoms makes a person feel better.
Yes.
It thwarts that therapeutic process. And so a person feels better, but they haven't dealt with the underlying causes. So they haven't dealt with the underlying toxicity, or the underlying starvation going on.
Yes, I suppose in a way it's like I'm just thinking of an analogy there. It's like having a train that's trying to reach its destination, but every time it gets going towards that destination, it breaks the track. So it never sort of finishes the process that it's got to do because
Yes,
you keep stopping it.
exactly. So,
With
well, then where does that lead? Well, the toxicity just builds up and builds up and builds up.
mm,
And at the end of the day, if you're not, doing these very simple, regular detoxifications, then you end up with a lot of toxicity. And this is where we have a big chronic condition, that's often called, well, there's one that with a begins with C, for example, a big one. And what is this? Well, it's a massive toxicity of the body. And at that point, it's a massive wake up call. It's like you've got a lot of work to do to clear out the shit,
yes.
essentially. Now, as I said earlier, we live in a very toxic world. We're being bombarded with toxins. We're not living in a pristine ecosystem. So I feel that just as well as just going with it when the body naturally goes into a detox process, I highly recommend, and this is what I practice in my own life, I highly recommend having some sort of regular detox protocol or protocols that you're applying quite regularly in your life. So I can give some examples of that.
Yes, please do.
Um, so one that I uh, think is fantastic is coffee enemas.
Now, please explain that because
Yes, yes.
I have this image in my head, and I would be interested in how you do this.
Well, I have to agree that there's a slight, it has its slight challenges, this process. Of
Right.
course, in our very, stiff upper lip British culture, we don't talk about things to do with the rear end, and
Yeah.
especially not putting things into that, and how do you do it? Oh my God, we don't talk about those things. No.
Well, I've got this idea of a stirrup pump and a cafetiere, so you might just have to explain.
It's very simple. What you do is you boil up the coffee, and then you mix it in a container. I'd recommend a stainless steel container designed for the purpose. And you get it to the right. You mix liquid with it so it's at the right temperature, which is body temperature, no
Right.
warmer and no colder. And this container, it's like a little bucket. It's got a tap on the bottom. It's got a valve on the bottom, and from there you've got a tube coming out, with a valve on the end, and the tube has a nozzle, if you like, which you insert into your rear end, and you line it all up so this is all going to work by gravity. Typically you do this in your bathroom. Obviously, maybe you'd be lying in your bath with the enema bucket
Yeah.
suspended above you and the tube coming down, and you insert it in the appropriate place, and then you open the valve and the liquid goes into the bowel, and you retain it there for ideally for 15 minutes. Now, you can just do an enema with water or
Mm.
with herbs. And doing enemas in that regard is great because, you're just flushing out the lower bowel, which is a good thing to do anyway. But coffee, and you can use roasted coffee, but I would recommend as a even better one, green coffee, which is unroasted coffee. And there's links in my book to how to, all the information on this. Um, anyway, so what the coffee does as it's circulating through the blood and coming into the liver is it causes the liver to dump all the toxicity, all the accumulated toxins into the bowel through the bile. And because the blood circulates every 2 or 3 minutes, if you're retaining for 15 minutes, this has quite a number of times that this occurs. So, in other words, the liver is having a big, release, if you like, of toxicity into the bowel, where you can then finally release it after 15 minutes. You get onto the toilet and you release it. And it also causes the body to produce 300 times the amount of what's called glutathione than it normally produces. Now, glutathione is the body's detox chemical. So that then starts going throughout the body and causing even more detoxification and releasing of toxicity to occur. So it's a real fantastic um, way of, just having a good clear out. And the more regularly that you do that, then the less buildup of toxicity you'll find on each occasion.
And how regular are we looking at here,
Well, I
roughly?
would recommend at least once a week,
Right.
once every
Okay.
7 days, and it takes me about a couple of hours to do the whole process from beginning to end, really. So I would say, yeah.
And if you have a good relationship with your partner, they can presumably help you in
they
this
could they could but
uh,
it certainly can be done on your own as well.
on your own. Right.
um
Okay.
so
Don't
yeah.
say you don't learn something on this show,
Now,
ladies and gentlemen.
there's something called the Gerson therapy. And this was developed by a guy called Gerson and is very successful. A lot of people, when they get a chronic condition, particularly the one beginning with C,
Hmm.
um, decide, rather than taking, the chemotherapy or the radiotherapy, they decide to go with the Gerson therapy. And what is the Gerson therapy? it's doing about, well, a number of coffee enemas each day. So you're maybe doing 3 or 4 coffee enemas in the day, and in between, you're having very high quality juices. So, in other words, you're clearing out the crap, and then you're putting in some good stuff. And you're at a point where you're in a really serious condition. You've got a huge amount of toxicity, and so this is an emergency situation. And there's huge numbers of people who've applied the Gerson therapy and had fantastic results through that. As
Wow.
I say, I'm not making any claims about it. You go and discover for yourself, but it's
Yes.
certainly something to look at. So, as more in a more ordinary situation, we might want to go through periods of intense detoxification. But as a maintenance, I would say 1 a week is great. Now, let's think of what other methods you might go for. Well, fasting is another one where you stop eating. And the longer you do that for, the better. The body's then able to apply all its resources to detoxing and reconfiguring in whatever way is needed. Another one is, I'll just say 3 examples. So,
Yes.
coffee enemas, fasting, and another one which people might be drawn to is castor oil packs. So, this is putting an absorbent material with castor oil absorbed into it on different parts of the body, typically the abdomen, typically the liver area. And that castor oil is able to start drawing toxins out through the skin.
So would you say, like, some, when you say material, like a muslin or something like
Well,
that?
you can buy, castor oil packs, and that's what I recommend,
Oh, right.
specific ones. And then there's a little sort of, there's a protocol with it, but that's the basics of it. And as I say, that more information would be on my book, or obviously
Yeah.
people can just do just general internet search on that. But obviously, I would recommend my book because it has all this stuff in it.
Well, I mean, one of the things about having a book to hand, yours or anybody's, is that it's a constant reference, and that's why people send me PDF books, which is very nice. But having a hardback copy or a softback copy or a hard copy means that you can refer to it very quickly, very easily. And
Yes.
your book has been laid out so well that you can immediately find things. You've labelled things very, very clearly.
Thank you, Richard. And also, if you buy the book, you get the PDF as well. So you get the best of all worlds because there is a lot of links in there.
Yes.
So if with the PDF, you can just easily click on the link. But yeah, as you say, reading a book, having a physical copy is much more easy to read.
So,
Yes,
well,
and I mean the other big thing for me to say is within all of this, this is not just theory for me. This is not just all academic. I'm applying this in my life. I'm applying bioterrain medicine, the terrain of the body. I'm applying this to my own health situation, and I'm having fantastic results. So that's, in big part why I'm so enthusiastic and passionate about this and want to share this perspective with others if you feel drawn to check it out.
as I'm sure people have seen through listening to you, your enthusiasm and the knowledge that you've gained in putting this book together, which is brilliant. Well, we've been talking for just over an hour now, incredibly.
Yes,
It's, it's funny how the time just
it
passes, and I'm
does.
sure we could talk for another hour. I try not to keep them too long. So let me just remind everybody: the book is called "The Myth That Viruses Cause Disease and the Nature of Illness: A Treatise of Bioterrain Medicine" by Daniel Thompson-Mills. I will leave a link to your website where
Yes,
people can
yes.
get the book.
Can I just say, yeah, the website's called dandelionspeaks.msvr.uk. Dandelionspeaks.msvr.uk.
And it's worth you saying that because sometimes this platform does stop links going to external sources. So
Yes. Yes.
if you missed it, it's important that you get that last bit, particularly
Yes. Yeah.
dandelionspeaks.msvr.uk, and then you can find out all sorts of things about Daniel, his work, and his other books, which of course are there. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we'll have to get you back because you are a very clear and lucid speaker. The case against man-made climate change, which of course is being thrust down our throats at this very moment, in every which way to
Yes. Yes, indeed.
justify everything.
Yes. Yes.
So it would be good. But Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time to go through that. I'm sure people have got something from that. It's the terrain theory idea, or the words of that, has been sort of bandied about, and I was never quite sure what that meant. But it wasn't until I actually read your book that I got it into my head what it means.
Yes.
And
Now, I would say the terrain aspect is not a theory. It's a functioning model. When we look at reality, we can see that the terrain model is the reality. So I
yeah.
prefer to steer away from the word theory in relation to it, because we anyway, there you go. You can decide.
Well, people can put it. We all carry it if it's at the terrain of our body,
Yeah,
and we can all put it to the test by
exactly.
some of those those simple protocols that
Yeah,
you've spoken about.
nurture your soil.
Absolutely. And the thing is, most of us know that if you eat all the wrong foods, you're not you're going to get ill. I mean, it's not like it's a huge revelation. It's
No.
changing people's habits to do that, because life has become so convenient in that direction of very quick, instant gratification, and convenience foods, convenience shops. Everything's very easy, but it isn't that difficult to.
Well, all my books, if I put it down to one word, it's about empowerment.
Right.
Now, in this sphere, of course, we're with the whole germ theory. You're under attack from these pathogens, and you're at the mercy, of all these outside forces, and the
Yes.
body's not strong enough to defend itself, so you need help from, pharmaceuticals and so on, to strengthen your system and provide immunity and all this stuff. Well, no.
So, absolute, and empowerment in this particular period of time is what we all need, and you give us some very positive, empowering messages. So I thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Richard.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Great.
I'm sure the audience has got something from it. I'll be back again with more of my wonderful interviews and my monologues. But for the moment, as time has beaten us once again, from Daniel and myself, thank you so much for watching. Till next time, goodbye.